welcome to the next lesson in our complete Intro to Rendering in Blender course. Quick reminder, we're offering the entire first unit of our course for free for a limited time here on YouTube. If you're new here, I'd recommend starting at the beginning of the course. I've added a link in the description. All right, go ahead and open up Blender and let's jump right in.
To begin this lesson, we'll continue with the file we were working on. And if you open the file new, it may default to a different rendered view. So come up to the top right of your viewport and pick the viewport shading option for rendered. And then that should bring the monkey head up with that tan color, the black pupils, and that image texture in the background on the plane. Now in the last lesson, we covered the basics of materials, adding colors, adjusting their properties, and also bringing in an image texture right at the end. But that image texture is supposed to be of a metal that has some rust on it. And right now it's looking quite flat. So how do we use those image textures that we bring in and make them look more realistic, especially when we're getting them from a website that gives us everything we need to create perfectly realistic materials, like we did with the Ambient CG website? Well, in this lesson, we'll cover how to do that. And I want you to think of this lesson as whether you've created something from scratch, like for example, just the color here on the monkey's face, or you've imported a material that's supposed to be realistic like we did here in the back. The best and most realistic looking materials often require more than just fine-tuning the few settings that you see over here on the right. And while you could use things over here, the far easier way to do this is to use something called the shader editor. So let's do this. Go up to the top, and we are on the layout workspace tab right now. Come over to the side where it says shading and go ahead and click on that. And you'll notice a whole bunch of stuff changes for you. And really what happened is your screen got subdivided into many different editors. So up here at the top is your viewport, and really all that's happened is that it's just changed the rendered view you have here. So if you go up to the top right corner of your screen, you'll see that you've got viewport shading for material preview. And this can be super useful when you're working with materials, but it's not going to show you the exact thing that you're going to get out of your rendered view. So for the purposes of this lesson, let's go ahead and switch that over to the far right one for rendered. Now the other thing is we're not looking through our camera at the moment, so let's go ahead and click on that camera to look through it. Now once again, it's not that I'm suggesting that you'll always use the rendered view when you're using the shader editor. It's just that we'll do that for now so we can see how our final rendering is going to change based off of the things we do here.
Hey everyone, we're doing something a little unconventional here, and for a limited time, we're giving you access to the entire first unit of one of our paid courses for free right here on YouTube, and this lesson is a part of it. Blender is a beast of a program to learn, but with the right approach, it doesn't have to be. That's why we created Blender Academy, to help people build the Blender skills they need and then go out and get the jobs they want. We hope you find these lessons to be a good investment of your time. If you do, and you're serious about learning Blender, head over to our website and continue learning with us. Thanks for watching, make sure to like and subscribe, and now, back to the lesson.
Now, I'm not worried too much about the left two windows here. We'll cover those in future lessons, and the right-hand side looks the same. So it's this bottom area that we want to focus on now. This is the shader editor. And if you roll your mouse wheel in or out, you can zoom in and away from this workspace. And if you hold down the Shift key while holding down your center mouse wheel like orbiting, then you move around, you can pan your view so you can see everything there. Now, these different boxes here are called nodes, and each node is going to do something that's ultimately telling Blender how the material should look. Now, the nodes work from left to right. So there are inputs on the left, and they might go into another input on the left and eventually make their way to an output on the right. Now, just to make sure we understand what we're working with here, you can click and hold down and drag them. If they're all selected, they'll move around together and let go. Click once in black space here, and then just click on one of them to select it. Now click and hold down on it and move it around, and you'll notice that you'll move it around all by itself. These nodes have different sockets. The sockets are the little dots here that have different colors. And the sockets are connected by noodles, sometimes called wires or lines. They're also called noodles. So this is telling this particular node that has a color socket to send that color information through this noodle over to this node and to send it into its base color socket. Now each socket has different colors, and the colors more or less tell you how they're going to hook up. For example, we see here that a yellow socket is hooked up to a yellow socket. I'll zoom in a bit so we can see that better. You could imagine that a gray socket is generally going to link up to a gray socket, a purple one to a purple one, and green ones to green ones. Now, we dive into all of the details about how to use the shader editor and all of the underlying details that will help you master the shader editor and shader nodes in general. And we do that all in a future set of lessons. Right now, we're going to keep it fairly simple just to do a few basic things to this rust metal material. But I'll go ahead and try to cover a few of the things that will demystify what you're doing here. Okay, while you don't need to memorize all of this, the green sockets are usually for output information. The yellow sockets are usually for color information. The gray sockets are usually for black and white data or data about whether something is a 0 or a 1 or somewhere in between. That'll make more sense in just a little bit. And then the purple sockets are generally about vector information, so the direction that something should be pointing. And I don't expect any of these to make a lot of sense just yet, but as we move through this example, you'll start to understand a little bit more about what all that stuff means. Okay, so if you roll your mouse wheel backwards a bit to zoom out of there, and hold down Shift and the center mouse wheel to pan over a bit, let's set up this metal material from scratch. And so we're actually going to delete it away here in the shader editor. So go ahead and click on that far left node and then press X on your keyboard and it will delete it away. And you'll notice that the base color here for the principled BSDF, that's back to the same blue we had before. Notice on the right hand side, if you click on the material tab, this information here is the same as this information here. So you could adjust things here in the shader editor on this node, or you could adjust it over here as well. Okay, we know how to delete a node. That's by selecting it and pressing X. But how do we add one? Let's go ahead and add that node back from scratch here as if we had never done it over on the right-hand side. So down here in the shader editor, hold down your Shift key and press A. So it's the same way that you add things when you're working in the three-dimensional model. And we want to find texture and then hover where it says image texture and click on that. You'll notice now if you move your cursor around, you're in the middle of a move. So go ahead and just move that over to the side a bit and click to set it down. Then go ahead and click on the Open tab. Find where we downloaded that file from a previous lesson. Double click into that folder if needed. And then pick the one that says Color and pick Open Image. Now you've opened that image there, but you see that the background is still blue. And that's because you haven't sent that information from this node over to the next node over. So to do that, you click and hold down on the socket next to color and drag a noodle out until you land on base color and let go. And it pops it in there. So that process was just doing the exact same thing that we had done in a previous lesson, only you're doing it in the shader editor. Okay, but this is still the same flat color. And we noticed when we downloaded that folder from Ambient CG, it came with many more files. And those files are something we can import here as image textures, and then we can link them up to different values over here on the principled BSDF shader. So let's go ahead and do that. Shift A, let's find texture and come over to image texture again and click on it. And let's move this one just beneath here and click and let go. You might need to navigate by holding down the Shift key and the center mouse wheel to pan up a bit. Then let's go ahead and click Open. Find that folder, go inside of it, and let's find the one that says Metalness. Go ahead and click on that to select it and pick Open Image. So this time we want to link this node up to the metal or the metallic setting over here on the principled BSDF shader. So let me pan this down a bit. Now you'll notice here that the color is yellow and we want to send that color into a gray socket for metallic. So there are times where you can actually connect a yellow and gray socket, and I'll explain how that works. Go ahead and click and hold down on color and drag it up to the metallic socket and let go. You'll notice something up here changes. So you've definitely added some metallic look to this. You see a more shiny aspect going on. But there's one more change to make, and that's if you pan back down here in the shader editor, where it says color space, flip this down, and you want to switch it to non-color. So this isn't always going to be the case, but in general, when you have an image texture and you need to send it to a gray socket, that gray socket is usually expecting black and white information or shades of gray in between. That's telling you that there are going to be places in the image that are black, which equals 0, or no effect for whatever you're plugging it into. There are going to be spots that are 1 or white, which are going to have full effect for whatever you're plugging it into. And then there's going to be areas that are different shades of gray, which might represent 0.2 or 0.4 or 0.6. So in this case, it can have variation on how metallic it is across the surface, which is perfect because it will be metallic where there's metal and it will be non-metallic where there's rust. And where the rust is sort of showing through to the metal, it'll be partially in between the two. The non-color just strips out any of the expected color information and reduces it down to that 0 to 1 black and white style information. Okay, again, that's a little bit more than we're ready for, but just important to know that whenever you're plugging these in, you'll generally switch that to non-color. All right, let's find another image that we downloaded and bring it in as well. So Shift A, texture, image texture, and we can place this one over to the side for just right now. If you want these to all be going down in a column, you could of course zoom out a bit, pan, then click and drag this underneath. There's really no right or wrong to where you place these, but placing them in an organized fashion will be helpful later. Then click Open, go into the folder, and find the roughness JPEG. Go ahead and click on it and pick Open Image. Next, we want to hook the color socket up to the roughness socket up above. So click and hold down on this socket here and drag your noodle up. And even though I can't see the other node, if I go up, it'll slide up and go up to where you have the roughness socket and let go. And you notice now, once again, this changed quite a bit. So there are parts that are really shiny and other parts that are rough. And so we're getting a totally new effect there. Now we need to adjust that bottom one to non-color. So let's go ahead and pan down. That's Shift and the center mouse wheel to pan down. And then go down to where it says color space and switch that to non-color. And you notice that changes the result quite a bit. So with just those three that we've added in, we've already made this look quite a bit more realistic than it was when we first started out with this lesson. Now, of course, this still isn't perfect. There were more files that we downloaded in that folder that we'd need to hook up as well to make this a truly realistic material, or at least faithful to what we saw on that website. But even still, with just this quick dive into the shader editor, you're already well on your way to using what we've done here to creating your own realistic or very stylized looking materials in Blender. And again, to keep this lesson simple, we're not going to dive any further for right now, but we do cover all of these details in a future set of lessons. Now that being said, I do want to show you a really cool trick that's actually going to make all of this way easier than what we've done so far. To do it though, we're going to actually get rid of all the work we just did, but we're going to get rid of it in a certain order because I want to show you one more thing before the tip. So down there in the shader editor, let's go ahead and pan our view up by holding Shift and the center mouse wheel and dragging our view up. Let's go ahead and get rid of the color JPEG first. So that's the one for the base color. So click once on it to select it and then press X on your keyboard. And notice something really cool in the background here. So we got rid of the image, but we still have the metallic and roughness images driving those values. So what's cool here is we have a plain base color, but we can still link up image textures to metallic, roughness, and these other slots and come up with some really interesting results. So just pointing this out that in the shader editor, you can mix and match a lot of cool different things to come up with different effects. But we want to get rid of all of it. So let's go ahead and click on the next one down, press X to delete it away. Notice that even still with that metalness one gone, you still have the roughness, which is still driving some sort of smudges on the back. So a different look still. Now, before we delete that last one, I do want to point out, let's just say that you didn't want to delete it, but you wanted to unlink it, or maybe you linked it into the wrong socket. Try this. Hover over where it says roughness, that socket there, and click and hold on and drag it away and let go. And you've broken that connection between the two. Notice up here, you no longer have any smudges on that plane, but you still maintain this node in here in case you want to either rehook it up somewhere else or you just want it there for some other purpose. You can always drag those away. But in our case, we actually want to delete this. So go ahead and click once on it, press X, and you've deleted it away. Okay, so here's the cool trick that you can use to actually automate everything that we've done in this lesson. And we're going to use this trick to make our plane material, that one with the rust and the metal, look even more realistic than what we've done so far. First, in order for the trick to work, we're actually going to need to enable an add-on called Node Wrangler. So go up to your top menu and pick Edit, and then go to Preferences. In your Preferences on the left-hand side, click on Add-ons. Then come over to the search, click in there and type Node. And you'll notice that you get different add-ons, and one of them is called Node Wrangler. Go ahead and check the box next to it to enable Node Wrangler. We don't need to get into the details of what Node Wrangler is, but suffice to say that once you're going to use any type of nodes in Blender, so we're using shader nodes right now, but there are other types that we'll learn about in future lessons. When you're going to use any of them, Node Wrangler will give you some extra functionality that you'll come to rely on. So it's not a bad idea to enable it right now. Plus, we're about to use a really cool feature, and you'll need it for the rest of this tutorial to work. Once you've done that, you can close down the preferences. Then down in the shader editor, be sure to select the principled BSDF node. So you can click up here on the top and you'll see that white outline. Notice that if you click on the monkey head to select it up in the top viewport, you'll have a different principled BSDF. And if you click on this one here, that would be the wrong one to select. So come up and make sure you've selected that plane, and then come down and select that principled BSDF shader. And then the next part will work perfectly. So again, with Node Wrangler enabled and the proper shader node selected, hold down the Control key and the Shift key and press the letter T on your keyboard. Then make sure you're inside of that folder that we downloaded from Ambient CG. And we're going to import all of the various images in one fell swoop that we need to make this a realistic material. So to do that, on a Mac, hold down the Command key. On a PC, hold down the Control key. And then that will allow you to click on one of these to select it, and then click on another one to add it to your selection, and so on. And we want to select color, displacement, metalness, normal GL, and roughness. Then you can let go of that key on your keyboard. We'll describe more about the difference between the two types of normal, as well as any other potential images you might get depending on where you downloaded them from. We'll cover all of that in a future set of lessons. For right now, for this particular folder, let's pick those 5. And then hovering over that bottom right blue button, it says Principled Texture Setup. Go ahead and click on that. And you notice something really incredible happens down low. So if you zoom out a bit to look at your shader editor, and you can actually hover up where these two different workspaces are meeting up and drag this up a bit so you can see a little bit more down here. You'll notice that not only did it import all of those images in, it hooked all of the noodles up properly. It even switched the color information. It added some new nodes in that we haven't even covered yet, like a normal map one and a displacement map one. And it did something we didn't even do before, which would have helped our material even more, something called texture, coordinate, and mapping to help all of these things line up properly. So it's not important right now that you understand exactly how all of this works. This is something we cover in great detail in another set of lessons. But the idea here is that with Node Wrangler, you could just select them all and bring them in at once, and then it just dials everything in for you. And if you look up now at the top, I'll go ahead and drag this down a bit. You'll notice that our metal material is even more realistic. I can see some scratches and denting if I look really closely. That's due to the normal map and displacement map that was brought in. And everything's just looking way more realistic than before we started this lesson. Again, you could still come in here and dial in any aspects of the underlying noodles and nodes, but that did all of the heavy lifting for you. All right, hopefully you have an overview of how to use the shader editor and shader nodes. I don't expect you to understand exactly how all the things are working underneath the hood just yet, but you have a basic idea of how to set some of these things up yourself. And we also have this trick now where we don't even need to know everything underneath the hood to get those realistic materials that we've downloaded from Ambient CG to plug right into Blender and make our materials in our model look so much more realistic. So from there, I highly recommend that you go shopping for some other materials, download their folders, and see if you can follow anything from this tutorial to set up your own realistic materials, either in this Blender model, or again, you could start a new model, add some meshes, and try applying different textures, either ones that you create yourself, ones that you experiment with here in the shader editor, or ones that you import from sites like Ambient CG. Once you've practiced for a while and you feel really comfortable with what you've learned here, you're ready to move on to the next lesson.
Congratulations, you made it through the lesson. Did you find this video to be helpful? Let us know by giving it a like. If you're ready for the next lesson, you can find it in this playlist. And if you're interested in learning more about how we can help you build the skills you need, head over to BlenderAcademy.com. Thanks for watching, don't forget to subscribe, and until next time, happy blending!